You look stressed. I got you some tea. I put a little something in there. Now, what I'm gonna say won't be all sunshine and rainbows, but now you're ready to hear it. Things will get worse. This is just the beginning. Tech is crashing, it's a huge dumpster fire, and we barely just got into the second month of the year. Let's not forget we had around 150,000 layoffs last year. Twitter laying off half their employees, but we kind of expected that from Elon Musk. And even Amazon, who was previously begging people to join, now laid off so many people. They're implementing a hire freeze, and it's just not a great time to be getting into tech right now. If you're new here, I'm Delia, I'm a software engineer, and I wanted to give you my 2 cents about the situation. In this video, we're gonna discuss what's happening, why it happened, and what's next, including my prediction on how long it's gonna last, how it might affect you, whether you're new to the tech industry, still thinking of joining, or maybe you've been in the tech industry for years, as well as my personal advice for you. So keep in mind, this is all my opinion and don't take anything to heart too much, but I do hope that this video is gonna be helpful for a lot of you. So let's start with why this happened. Okay, there's so many things going on. Interest rate hikes, rising inflation, macroeconomic uncertainty, all of that stuff obviously contributes to this, but since this is not an economics channel, and I don't want it to be, we're gonna keep things really simple. But it's very important that before we get into what is happening, you understand these 2 things about tech companies. 1, a lot of companies recently reached their market saturation because they're already mega monopolies and it's not sustainable for them to keep growing at the same exponential rate that they have been. For example, out of the 4.7 billion people who have access to the internet, 4.3 billion already use Google, 2.7 billion use Instagram, 2.5 billion use WhatsApp. And 2, big tech companies afford to pay so many tech workers because they pay them mostly in stocks. They actually couldn't afford to pay everyone in actual cash. At Google, my cash salary was actually under market rate, but what makes up for it is a bunch of Google stocks. Why would companies rather pay in stock? Well, first, employees then have a vested interest to make the company succeed. And secondly, the golden handcuffs. Stocks usually vest over a period of 4 years, and that way companies make sure that you stay there because you want to keep your stock. But the third and most important reason companies pay in stocks is that they can just dilute existing shareholders and create more stocks. It's a really easy way for them to keep paying people. And stock dilution does make shares go down, but when you're at the level of Facebook or Google or all these big tech companies that have billions of dollars of market cap, diluting stock doesn't really affect the stock very much. So it's kind of like printing money. But the thing is, these companies need to continue exponentially growing in order for this to keep working. And this is also why it's so hard for non-FAANG companies to compete in terms of compensation, because many other companies offer cash compensation and they can't afford that kind of dilution. And with how the stocks have been performing, they probably can't afford this very long term. And investors aren't looking forward to a very bright future for stocks. It's only sustainable if they keep seeing exponential growth. And exponential growth is no longer sustainable. All right, now that we understand these things, let's move on to a very, very simple explanation of what's going on. I put timestamps down below if you already know what happened and you want to skip this part, but I think it's important to first understand why all of this happened and then understand what we can do about it. I tried using my computer, but there was too much glare, so I hope this is better. All right, so why did all of these tech layoffs start happening? And the short answer is capitalism. Ooh. Yes, we live in capitalism. Now, the long answer is far more interesting, and if you listen to the whole thing, I'm sure you'll know more than 99% of people. So during the Rona, as you all recall, we spent a lot of time locked down, so we spent way more time indoors, which means we spent way more money online because we spent way more time online. And who benefits from people spending money online? Online businesses, tech businesses, because we're indoors watching more ads, spending more money on e-commerce, making more online transactions. And so therefore, tech companies made way more money, and there's this big tech boom. Venture capitalists were throwing money at anything that resembled a tech startup. Zoom, TikTok, Google, every stock went up, every company did great. So everybody was hiring because they wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. They had all this room for growth, and they needed people to help them grow even more. Google hired 40% of their employees during the pandemic, which is absolutely wild. I watched as Google hired 50,000 people, and it was insane. New people were joining left and right, and it did feel extremely unsustainable. So I'm sure a lot of people probably saw this coming. Everybody gets greedy during booms, and tech companies got super greedy with a hiring frenzy. They just hired people left and right and hired so irresponsibly, because now that lockdown is over, people aren't spending as much money, and we're basically also in a recession, but that's a whole other story. But part of the reason that happened is because lockdown stopped, things started opening up again, and people were spending less time indoors, which means watching less ads and spending less money online, which means tech companies make less money, which means that they are gonna have to cut some costs because their bottom lines aren't looking so great anymore. Not only that, but a lot of companies, for example, TikTok and Facebook, they came to this natural plateau in their growth phase. And it just so happened that natural plateau corresponded with everything opening back up, people spending a lot less, and people spending less means companies make less. And what's the best way for companies to cut costs and improve their profits? Cutting salaries, because salaries are companies' biggest costs. Now, what's also interesting is why now. A lot of companies like Twitter laid off half their employees in 2022, Amazon, Facebook, so many companies laid off people in 2022. Why are all of these companies only catching up now and doing layoffs in January of 2023? Well, actually, January for the last 10 years has been the most popular month for layoffs, and that's mainly because of calendar accounting, because it's the first month of the year. And similar to how you say, oh, new year, new me, I'm gonna lose weight, companies think like that too. New year, new me, I'm gonna lose some weight. Because they have all of the information from the year before, all of their budgeting, all of their accounting has happened, and now they're planning for the new year, so they cut costs January. That's why it's the most popular month for layoffs. Additionally, and take this one with a grain of salt, some companies can also avoid paying bonuses by laying people off in January. A lot of companies didn't do this. A lot of companies were a little more ethical, like Google did pay out all of their bonuses and gave some pretty good severance packages and did more than what they're legally obligated to do. But January is also a good month for layoffs because I think there is a legal loophole where technically you don't have to pay the yearly bonuses anymore. And finally, I think a lot of companies waited this long because they didn't want to seem like that. When you're the first one to do something really bad, you seem like it was not a good look for Twitter to lay off half its workforce. It was not a good look for Meta either. There was a lot of backlash. There is backlash now too, but now everybody's used to it. You normalize this a little bit. So I think either companies waited this long because they truly did have good intentions and wanted to wait as long as possible to try to make things work and not have to do any layoffs. But in reality, I think it also, from a press perspective, looks better for the companies that do it later. It almost looks like, oh, that's so nice. They waited this long. They must have really tried to make things work and not go to these desperate measures. I don't think that's necessarily why, but just throwing that out there. Anyway, so what's next? Okay, now we understand why it happened, but what's next? That's what you really want to know. And what should you do about it? What's next is probably more layoffs. A lot of investors actually messaged Sundar, the CEO of Google, saying that the layoffs were disappointing. Not because they laid people off and people can't feed their families, pay their mortgages. No, because the layoffs were not deep enough. That's why they were disappointed in the layoffs. So I foresee there's going to be a lot more layoffs throughout the year. I do hope that January was the worst month because of the accounting reasons I just mentioned. But we're probably going to see a slow tapering off throughout the year for a lot of the companies that just started laying people off. So there's going to be more rounds of layoffs coming soon. Good to be prepared for that. And even if you think you're not going to be affected, it's always good to prepare for the worst case scenario. So keep that in mind. Additionally, a lot of countries have laws against these types of layoffs. It's only North America, like Canada, US, where the laws are a little iffy and companies can just kick you to the curb after you've been with the company for 17 years. Now, you cannot do that in Europe, for example. So I talked to a lot of my Google Europe friends. It sounds like the situation over there is also not looking great, but they can't lay people off because of legal reasons. So if we wait long enough, we might see some layoffs globally in countries where those laws are a little more strict and it takes more time to lay people off. So that's why I think it's going to be a slow tapering off. But hopefully companies can get their together and stop the bleeding soon. I hope that's what's going to happen. But regardless of that situation, I definitely think we're gonna enter a recession by any definition. If you don't think we're already in a recession, we're definitely gonna get into one soon. And things will get worse before they get better. I am certain of that, unfortunately. So prepare for the worst case scenario. Thirdly, there's going to be a huge shift in tech. I think a lot of people are going to realize that we're glorifying these big tech companies and move towards small businesses, startups, being freelancers, having our own jobs, maybe the creator economy. It is good to be flexible and keep your mind open to all of the different possibilities for work, not just big tech. And finally, the biggest one of all, there's going to be a huge shift in tech because of automation. So if, not when, this tech bubble recovers, the tech bear market once again becomes a hiring bull market, then we're going to see a lot of the jobs that used to exist be automated with AI tools, things like that. So the jobs that are going to exist even a year or two from now, when this has all recovered, are going to be a little different than the jobs we see today. So the best thing you can do to prepare is be ready and understand AI, understand how to use AI tools, and be ready for that automation. Now, that was a very simple version of the long answer. In reality, we also have to consider interest rates, inflation, and the fact that the US printed 30% of its money supply in the last 2 years, which is absolutely ridiculous. So obviously, that kind of bubble that gets created is going to pop at some point. So it's not just tech. Obviously, it's going to be the whole economy. But if we take a magnifying glass and focus just on tech, that's what happened with tech. And a lot of these tech companies can afford to not lay off people, but investors are the main thing. Investors aren't seeing the same returns as they used to. Inflation is through the roof. That's why they want to see a little bit more money on those balance sheets. And I expect that this worst period is going to be for at least a year, maybe a year and a half. And then we're going to see some sort of recovery because this is cyclical. This is going to recover. Don't worry. Don't stop coding. Everything will be fine, I promise. What can you do to prepare? Well, we'll have to keep this for a separate video, but the biggest thing to do is make future-proof decisions. Prepare for the worst-case scenario, work on acquiring future-proof skills, and invest in yourself as much as you can. Learn to use AI tools to your advantage, learn how infrastructure and bigger picture concept work, focus on the fundamentals, not on trends, and focus on those skills that are harder to automate and that AI won't be able to take over. At the end of the day, we're all gonna make it through this, but when we get out on the other side, we're gonna be in a totally different world that we should prepare for now. I hope that this gave you a good overview of what's going on. Like this video if you found it useful. Remember to subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next one.